Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Realities of Rural Recruitment, Remedies and Resources. I'm extremely happy to be with you today because I do really love recruitment and I'll talk to you about that in a bit. We want to discuss recruiting, especially in rural areas, the challenges that it may bring, opportunities that exist, and resources to help you bolster your recruitment. Many elements of recruitment can be used in any context, but we also know that rural recruitment can be very different from recruiting in urban areas, as well as with projects that have nationally recognized names. My name is Eric Powell, and I'm an AmeriCorps Vista Training Specialist with the Corporation for National and Community Service. I proudly served as a Vista member in 2006 with Rhode Island Campus Compact and a Vista leader in 2008 with Illinois Campus Compact. And then later, I was a Vista program manager where I was responsible for recruiting for 14 positions and going through all the processes that I'm sure many of you have gone through and are going through with regards to recruitment. And I would agree with you that recruitment is not always as easy as it may sound. In my current role as Vista Training Specialist, I focus on developing, adapting, and shaping learning avenues for Vista supervisors and sponsors staff through webinars, materials, and resources. So today I'll be hosting and presenting the webinar, as well as facilitating the chat activities throughout and the live question and answer session at the end of the webinar. And I do also want to give a shout out to my team that's always supported, Barbara Reynolds, as well as Mike and Jeff from LSI, who will be supporting us throughout this webinar. You may also see them in the chat panel posting some links and questions, as well as assisting with various aspects of the webinar. Let's talk about our session goals. Today, we're hoping that you will be able to understand the basic and essential elements of recruitment, realizing that you probably already know these, but it's a good idea to quickly refer back to foundational elements from time to time. Explore the unique challenges and opportunities for rural recruitment, especially because some of them have similarities to general recruitment, and there's also some significant differences. Take some time to reflect on your current recruitment methods and strategies for enhancing and improving them to really attract good quality candidates and retain them throughout the recruitment process. We'll leave time for you to share some examples and suggested tips with each other, since you're not alone in this process and many of you have ideas that can work very well. And then finally, we want you to consider other, perhaps non-traditional, ways to help support recruitment, especially in rural areas. Specifically looking at the agenda, today we'll cover a few topics. Recruitment 101. We'll very quickly cover the basics of recruitment to ensure that everyone knows what's involved. In Vista member feedback, we're going to provide you some sometimes juicy, sometimes exciting comments that we've heard from Vista members pertaining specifically to their recruitment and how that set the stage for their year of service, which may be useful for you as you start to think about your recruitment plan. Realities of rural recruitment. We'll discuss what some projects actually experience in terms of challenges and opportunities for recruiting in rural areas. We'll then talk about some Vista Campus resources that may help you in terms of information, webinars, and more on general and rural recruitment. And we'll end with an evaluation, next steps to get you moving forward and giving you ideas as to how you can take some next steps. And then ending with questions and answers. We'll have time to answer many of your questions. So let's go ahead and get started. We all likely use the word recruitment to generally mean the same concept. However, recruitment encompasses many, many elements. So let's briefly explore the basics, what it involves, and give you more insight into what you should know. To begin, we have a question for you. Some people may be excited about recruitment like I am. Some people are nervous and anxious, while others are uncertain about how to get started or proceed. The question is, when you hear the word recruitment, what thought first comes to your mind? Please try to be specific about your thoughts, your feelings, what you think about it. It could be good or challenging. Don't think too hard. We're just looking for a quick question as to what the first thought that pops into your mind is. Certainly, if you have a Vista project, you want Vista members, of course. You want to have quality Vista members who will be engaged and enjoy their year of service with you as their project. So post your response in the chat now, which may also help you make connections with other supervisors and projects such that you can support each other. So here you see some people, when they hear recruitment, they think of advertising, selecting candidates, need for help. Yes, a lot of us do need assistance in our recruiting efforts. Timely, recruitment certainly is timely and takes quite a bit of time. I see marketing, a call to action. Ooh, and someone posted $3 signs. Yes, for some projects, effective recruiting does cost money depending on how you want to recruit and where you want to recruit, so you want to factor that into your budget. And I love this last one. I hope we get great applicants. Well, hopefully today's webinar will not just help you to hope that you get applicants, but will give you resources and tools so that you will get great applicants. So those are great. And as we know, recruitment really should be fun. We want you to think about that as we take apart the word recruitment. We'll start with re. Re means that it is not just one time, but you will be doing it again, since recruitment is cyclical, and you will need to recruit now and into the future. I'm going to go out on a limb and say the next part of recruitment is recruit. Well, that probably means absolutely nothing to you, right? I'm sure I'm right on that for once. But if you take it apart and spell out the letters, it spells C, are you it? Which is a question. C, are you it? Meaning, are you the only person who is responsible for and can focus on recruitment? You don't have to be, as you should look to other staff, and if you don't have enough staff or available staff, look to volunteers, both young and retired. Look for board members, community members, and others to advertise, promote, even spell check your recruitment. That makes a big difference. Have them review your flyers and marketing materials to make sure they're correct and appealing and more. And finally, the last part of recruitment is the phrase or the word meant. And that's important. Why? Because you were meant to be in this position, doing this work, which means that you and your amazing self were meant to successfully take on the task of recruiting and succeed at it. Okay, I know that was a stretch. Well, it was really a stretch. And corny, like I am, but hopefully you get the point. Have fun with recruitment. It is challenging, it is time-consuming, but have fun with it. So let's go. Recruitment contains many pieces, and here are just a few. You do not have to do it all alone, and you don't have to do any and all of these, but this may help you think about what you actually need and what recruitment is for your Vista project. Recruitment is specifically advertising on your website, in flyers, other places to include graphics and images, details about the position, and information to further promote the Vista program to your internal and external audiences. In addition to creating catchy opportunity listings that you post in eGrants that will show up on the my.americorps.gov website where people apply. In some ways, we want you to think about recruiting like grant writing, in that you really should focus your audience and craft recruitment specifically to your audience. Recruitment is showing your excitement for the Vista program, your enthusiasm for people to express interest in and apply to your project, and your eagerness to have them join your Vista project. Recruitment is also knowing what you need versus what you want, and there's a big difference there. Let me give you an example. You may put in your advertising that your Vista member is required to have a college degree. But why? Do you absolutely need someone with a college degree, or is that just simply a preference? If you don't need it, you could be excluding a really good segment of people who may be just as qualified to serve. Do you really need someone with specific college experience and expertise, or would you accept someone who needs just a little bit more training? Recruitment is also explaining why your Vista project is unique and impactful, talking about what's in it for your applicant and why serving with your Vista project could be a great fit for them. Recruitment is marketing elements of the Vista assignment description, or VAD, so that you are providing details regarding the specific activities that the Vista member will do. You want to know that applicants really want to know that in advance before they apply. Recruitment is also telling the story of your program to your colleagues, stakeholders, communities, and people in the surrounding area. Get other people on board. And never underestimate the power of storytelling and the words that your Vista members have. And there's a whole lot more involved with recruitment, so we won't spend a lot of time on this because this is the basic elements of recruitment before we talk about rural recruitment. And before we move on, I'll quickly add, when we say rural recruitment, we really leave the definition of rural up to each project. We know that there are some projects that are urban that are based in a major city, some projects that are rural that may be just outside of a city or really in remote areas. But we're doing this webinar because we want to promote how people can recruit outside of less populated areas that may have more challenges in recruiting and really getting their people to think about different ways to recruit. So let's talk briefly about what recruitment is not, so we can hopefully avoid some misnomers. In general, it may be helpful for you to think that recruitment is not doing nothing and expecting everything to fall into place. Obviously, even if you're a project that naturally gets a lot of applicants without having to do much work, recruitment goes far beyond just getting people to apply because you still need to effectively and continuously communicate with them, conduct thorough interviews, and more. Recruitment is not only advertising on the my.americorps.gov website. Certainly, all applicants must apply there, but you should also promote the positions on your websites and social media, using flyers, posters, and especially via word of mouth. Some projects even post videos on YouTube with their Vista members or Vista alumni telling their story. Further customize and edit your recruitment messaging, and then make sure it's customized to your audience. Recruitment is also not inadvertently misleading applicants about your Vista project or location. One example is if your Vista project is in a small town, you probably don't want to accidentally post pictures of a major city with lots of people if your small town doesn't have a lot of people. You just want to make sure that your recruiting is accurate and correct. Recruitment is also not doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. I'm sure many of us have heard this phrase before, which is often quoted by Albert Einstein. He's oftentimes quoted with this definition of insanity. And no, none of you are insane, but you are insanely awesome. So keep that in mind as you think about your recruitment efforts and how awesomely innovative you can be in thinking about ways to recruit and where you are. Recruitment is also not avoiding conversation about the terms and conditions, because you want to be honest and open to best inform applicants of their requirements before they accept an offer. Take the time to review the highlights of the terms and conditions with them and make them aware of some of the more common rules in the Vista Member Handbook. Recruitment is also not assuming that your local recruits do not need orientation and training just because they're local and know the area. Every Vista, no matter whether they're local or not, where they're from, should and needs to get an orientation and training from their Vista project. And finally, the last thing we'll mention on the slide, recruitment is also not the same at every project. Pretty self-explanatory. Everyone does things differently. You should recruit in the best way that makes it work for you. And let me give you an example. You may develop a beautiful recruitment section of your website, making all of your technology beautiful and wonderful. That's great. But if your community is one that rarely uses computers and much of the interaction is done face-to-face, you may want to adjust your strategy to do more storytelling and word-of-mouth recruiting. Remember, Vista members typically submit their application to multiple Vista positions. Some of them submit it to dozens of them. And because they want to keep their options open, they're looking for opportunities. So you want to do as much as you can to communicate effectively and continuously give them a reason to select your specific Vista project. When we talk about rural, not everyone sees the term rural as exciting. Unfortunately, some people may perceive it as a desolate, isolated, remote, maybe even a boring location. That's not good. But your recruitment strategy, being honest in your messaging, of course, can really help them think differently, and we'll give you some tips and tricks to help you with that in a few minutes. Once you get someone interested in your position enough to apply or even contact you, then it's your turn to hook them and captivate them. We posted a link in the chat to bring you to what we call a helpful links handout that'll give you some other ideas and materials to support you in this effort. And remember, you can of course get great ideas from other Vista projects on this webinar, as well as using the supervisor forums on the Vista campus website. In reality, we know that lots of challenges occur. As we said earlier, nothing's easy. Well, I shouldn't say nothing. A lot of recruitment elements are not easy. So let's talk about some of the challenges that are included but not limited to. Some rural projects say their area has a smaller population from which to recruit than big cities, so they're naturally getting fewer applicants. Other projects tell us that some local individuals look to leave their rural area for an urban city life where there may be more opportunities available personally and professionally for the applicant. Or, at times you may feel that the individuals who apply to your Vista project are not qualified enough for your project, and therefore you're still recruiting for longer periods of time. Another challenge, perhaps not everyone can easily get around in your rural area, especially if they don't have a car, and sometimes public transportation has less than ideal schedules, making it more challenging for someone who's not in the area to apply and relocate to your area. A few more challenges we've heard of. Some recruits may not see your rural area as exciting or appealing, so they decide to look elsewhere. Or, applicants to your Vista project may think that Vista service is a job with a salary, and during the application and interview process, they find out that it's actually a national service position, so they drop out because they were misunderstood. And if the Vista program is not widely known at your organization, or people in the community don't know Vista or haven't heard of it, you may not have very many Vista alumni to help you recruit. That also may make it challenging to form partnerships and invite other organizations to encourage some of their volunteers to consider Vista. You can change that by spreading the word and getting any of your Vista members and Vista alumni to do the same. When you encounter challenges, and we know that we will, unfortunately, embrace them and let them change you. Opportunities are just around the corner. And speaking of opportunities, let's talk about how to change challenges into opportunities. And I want to note that some of these ideas that are on the slide and that we'll talk about came directly from the most recent Vista Leader in-service training that we had a month ago, where several individuals got together as a group and specifically spoke about rural recruitment. So a lot of these ideas came from them. Number one, in your recruitment, be sure to talk about the community, the family, the people, the cultural and geographic setting, what people do for fun and enjoyment, and more. You want to give your applicants an idea of whether or not they think they can or will fit in with the community. It's not about scaring them, but it's about giving them enough information to make an informed decision that they don't regret and that they love serving with your Vista project. Number two, mention Vista service as a way to transition careers by participating in national service, working with a local organization, and gaining valuable experience. For some people, it could be a mid-career transition, trying to decide what to do between one career and another. For others, it could be a transition out of a career and before going to retirement. Number three, some Vista leaders mentioned, take time to encourage local residents to give back to their community, as the impact can sometimes be magnified hundreds of times in rural areas. This really helps local individuals remain involved and make a difference if they want to stay in the area. Number four, ask yourself what makes your Vista project, organization, and location beautiful. What do you and others enjoy about it? How can you market your project as a domestic adventure? And I love this idea. Spend some time in thinking about how you can highlight your project and location in that way. Just like some people are interested in the Peace Corps for an international immersion experience and more, think about how your project and location, whether rural or suburban or even urban, can really showcase itself as a domestic adventure and an experience for individuals to encounter. Number five, in considering your domestic adventure, focus on what you have and not what you don't have. It doesn't really make sense to talk about how you don't have this and don't have that, because that just makes the conversation negative, boring, and downright depressing. And by the way, please don't depress your applicants. They definitely will not apply to your project. Be honest about what your community has in terms of people, community, activities, maybe even some quietness and serenity, beautiful locations, etc. Remember, what you have does not have to be a physical, tangible thing. It could be something simple as having a heart and having a fabulous community of people who love to be around each other. And number 6, we ask you to think differently, recruit differently. Turn your thinking upside down and try something new. While what you have been doing may work really well, and if that works, you should continue it, but also leave room to explore new options that may not even require a lot of extra work. Seek opportunities and lots of possibilities. We go back to talking about Vista members and Vista leaders, and many of them have recently talked about what went well in their recruitment. And these might be new to you, these might surprise you, but we'll highlight some of them. So one of them is, make sure that you as a supervisor, the Vista sponsor staff, and organization understand the Vista program's requirements and benefits. This is essential because including these details really helps Vista members decide if they can make it work before they officially commit. Second, once you receive a Vista member application, regularly communicate with the applicant with the address where to report, the dress code, who their supervisor will be, etc. It seems really simple and like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised at the number of Vistas who ask us questions about who my supervisor is, where do I report, what time do I report, etc. These are small details, but they make a big difference in terms of setting a Vista member up for success and really making sure they're prepared and excited for service. Third, listen attentively and actively to what applicants say that they need and desire, and this part a lot of people miss, listen to what questions they ask, because that can tell you a lot about the Vista members and what they're interested in. You don't need to cater to everything they request, of course, but really think about what it would be like if you were in their position, just starting a year of service. How would you feel? What would you need to be successful and valued? Fourth, to that comment, really understand what it's like to be a Vista member. You don't have to know everything, but consider what it might be like through the applicant's mind. And here are some options. 1, feel free to attend a Vista member orientation webinar along with your candidates when they start service so you're familiar with what they're doing. Take the Vista Terms and Conditions course and really understand this is a required course that Vista members have to take. That way you're knowledgeable about it as well. Explore the Vista Member Handbook, reviewing the Vista Member benefits, and reflecting on the needs of an applicant, especially if they relocated and need to find affordable housing, integrate with a new community, make friends, etc. Doing what you can to be fully prepared to answer applicants' questions and guide them through the process really helps them start their year off well. Some other ideas in terms of recruiting in general, but especially in rural areas. You may have to, and you may want to, look to recruit at different and perhaps unusual places to recruit. Some examples, some people really focus on recruiting from houses of worship because they're wonderful opportunities for recruitment since they likely already have a community, people may be interested in service there, and various houses of worship already have connections to other nearby communities and people. One thing you can do is reach out to high schools, colleges, and universities, as well as community colleges and other institutions of learning. You've probably already done that, but we're just highlighting it as an example. Remember that for AmeriCorps Vista, a college degree is not a requirement to serve. So think twice when you're putting your opportunity listing and recruitment materials together to ask yourself if your applicant really needs a college degree. If you happen to have seniors in your area, some of them oftentimes are looking to give back to their community. They may not all be interested in full-time service, and Vista is full-time service, but some may be, and you can explain in more detail how aspects of your project may help and support seniors. Keep in mind, though, some seniors may not be as excited about receiving the Education Award, since with the AmeriCorps Vista program, the Education Award is not transferable. So when you're marketing to seniors, you may want to focus more on benefits such as health care and training while in service. In many communities, there may be one or more central places that people gather. I found it odd, but I don't come from a rural area, so maybe it does make more sense. Someone once told me, in their town, the place that people gather and get excited to go to is Walmart, because that's the largest and most central thing that they have in their community. So find out where people spend their time, and inquire with restaurants and company owners, Maybe they'll let you put up a flyer, set up a table, even have a speaking event. Do your research in your community, and it'll help you go a long ways. So now that you know a little bit about what's on the minds of some of our Vista members, and before we continue with more of the really important part of the presentation, I'm going to ask you, what other realities do you see for recruiting in rural areas, and what ideas do you have to improve them? We want to get your ideas because we have a lot of ideas that we've come up with that we've heard from Vista members, Vista leaders, and Vista supervisors. But all of you out there doing the actual recruiting or being part of the process, you may have great ideas that you can share with others. So again, what are other realities that you see for rural recruitment? These could be challenges, these could be opportunities, and how would you improve them? I'll give you a quick example. One reality may be that you simply do not know where else to market your positions. You've tried lots of places, you've tried different things, but nothing seems to be working. Well, one option, and this is just one, is to create a discussion thread on the Vista Campus Supervisor forums and talk with other sponsors about where they recruit to get new ideas. Thinking about how to network with other sponsors, including on this webinar, sharing ideas and resources, because a lot of supervisors will specifically tell us when it comes to recruiting, they don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. It would be nice if things were already invented, they could just adapt and use those resources. So that's one thing we definitely want to consider. And as you're including your responses, we want you to think about what ways can you improve your recruitment. I see, and as you're thinking about this, again, think for yourself, but also think for your Vista project about how you can improve ways to move on with your recruiting in rural areas. So as you do that, we're going to continue and move on to the next slide, and we'll come back to this in a minute. That'll give you time to think about the question, and we'll come back to this as we move forward and talk about more Vista member feedback. So here are some paraphrased comments that we've heard and still hear from Vista members that relate to their experience during the recruitment process just before starting service. So the first one is, the bad that I have is nothing like the opportunity listing to which I applied. This is a problem because it can confuse the Vista member and make them feel that they were misled. We know that the opportunity listing sometimes is a little bit more general and cannot contain all the details of the VAD, but you do want to make sure that there's symmetry and that the opportunity listing helps the applicant know a little bit about what they will be actually doing during their year of service. Here's another one. I don't know what to report on my first day of service. We covered this briefly early, a very simple detail. Make sure that you tell them details like this. Send them an email a week before service, but get them started to thinking about, again, what questions will they have before they start service, so they have to ask you less questions and they're fully prepared, knowing the dress code, where to report, who their supervisor is, what time to report, etc. Here's a third one that we'll give you. Do I have a supervisor? Who is my supervisor? I won't belabor the point, but we talk about this a lot because we get the question a lot. Who is my supervisor? Where are they? How do I contact them? Make sure that you provide this information to them ahead of time. And a couple more that we'll give you in terms of Vista member feedback. We've got 3 more. The next one that we'll give you is, someone should have told me that my living allowance amount earlier, because now I'm not even sure if I can financially make this work. This is a really big one because we expect that all supervisors know at least a general idea of how much the living allowance is. Also, if you don't know that, all living allowance rates by county are located on the Vista Campus Benefits page in the Living Allowance section. So you want to communicate this and other benefits to applicants early on so that when you do find a good fit and they want to join your program, you know that they're aware of the details and they're ready to commit to service. The next one is, I was told that I was automatically enrolled in healthcare when I joined. I cannot afford to get healthcare on my own. This is probably because they do not understand that Vista does not automatically enroll members into a healthcare plan, and that Vista does not provide members with insurance. Let me give you a very brief snippet, but you should go to get more information. The Vista program does offer a health benefit available to Vista members, but requires action on their part, based on whether the Vista member currently has their own coverage or insurance, or if the Vista member does not have their own coverage or insurance. I'm sure many of you have questions. For more details, you should go to the benefits page of the Vista campus, and you can also go to vistacampus.gov/healthcare. You'll want to know the details of that benefit and more. And the final piece of feedback that we get from Vista members that's pretty common is, I was misinformed and misled about benefits when I applied. Again, we don't want you to make up information. We know you're not trying to make it up. We also don't want you to mislead people. Direct your Vista members also to the Vista campus for the most up-to-date and accurate information on the benefits. Certainly, it is ultimately the responsibility of the Vista applicant and candidate to do their research and ask questions. However, in your recruitment and in trying to provide the best customer service, it is likely in your best interest to remind them of these things because they will not always know what questions to ask, especially before they start service. Here's a quote that I wanted to read. It is not your customer's job to remember you. It is your obligation and responsibility to make sure that they don't have the chance to forget you. Changing one word, we get, it is not your applicant's job to remember you. It is your obligation and responsibility to make sure that they don't have the chance to forget you. Think about that in relation to your project, and jot down ideas for yourself on how you can make sure that your marketing materials, print, electronic, videos, etc., your communication, email, phone, and more, and your interviewing really showcase your project such that it makes sure that the Vista member doesn't have the chance to forget you and remembers, I really want to apply to this project. I had a great interview, they were engaging, they were fun, this is where I want to serve. So think about this as you move forward. Given that this session is for you, let's see if any of you have a real-life rural recruitment scenario that could use assistance and may be general enough that it could apply to Vista projects as well. You may have some challenges, some questions, some actual stories or situations that you encountered and want to know how to resolve them. So as we move to the next slide, we're going to do an activity that hopefully is meaningful for you and meaningful for what you're going to be doing in your recruitment. In the chat panel now, we're going to ask you to type a real rural recruitment scenario, and it could just be a general recruitment scenario that you are encountering, have encountered, or have heard about. Since your name appears along with your chat response, please do not use real names of Vista members, staff, or other people. If you need to, you can make up names and use fake names, but we want to make sure to preserve people's privacy and information. So here's the deal. You post scenarios and situations. We'll pick one or two to focus on as our focus for this activity. It's a real-life activity. We want you to use a situation that may be fairly common for many sponsors so that we can analyze the problem together and consider solutions. As we do this, please keep in mind that you'll want to have an open mind as to how the situation relates to your Vista project and how you can utilize and adapt elements of the solution to fit the needs of the rural recruitment challenges at your Vista project. So as you go ahead and type a perhaps real-life rural situation that you have in the chat, I will scroll through quickly and take a look. And what I want to mention as we do that is the situation that you type in the chat panel could be a challenge, it could be a positive situation, or it could be a semi-neutral situation. You want to type the situation and see what comes up. So as I scroll through, I see a couple of situations. One is sub-site supervisors have an unrealistic expectation of the experience of applicants that they are interviewing. Okay, that's a possibility. Wow, the chat is moving quite quickly, so I'm trying to quickly find them. So another one I see is getting a lot of applicants, but none of them are the quality that people want, and they feel like the applicants are not suitable for the positions. Another one, many of our recruits are in it for the paycheck, which is pretty common, even just a small living allowance, not necessarily because they're not passionate about poverty, but because they want to they're leaving for a better paying job that comes along. So keep these ideas coming. I'm going to quickly select one for now that we'll start with, and then we'll go through it. And then if we have time, we'll do a second one. And hopefully, like I said, these scenarios will be general enough that you at least can see how something like this can apply to your project and how they can use. So the one we're going to start with is, I have two communities who serve granted sites prior to my coming on as a project manager at our Vista project. And I'm sure many of you have multiple sites that you work with. I have struggled to get the site supervisor to conduct interviews with applicants. My guess is probably due to timing, scheduling, workload, etc. I know that they're busy and volunteers, but I'm not sure how to make things faster. So the situation we're looking at is you have multiple sites. Some of the site supervisors and direct project managers are not willing or able to do interviews, and you want to figure out how to speed up the interview and applicant process. So with that, we'll ask you to go ahead and first type in the chat panel any thoughts you have about how to speed up the process and encourage local site supervisors and project managers at the sites to be directly involved in the recruitment. I know earlier someone posted that was one of the most successful aspects of their Vista project, that they got their site supervisors involved who are really doing the direct recruitment. And so if you posted that or if you have ideas, type in what we can use in this situation to help people think about how to get them directly involved. So as you type, I will provide my response. So one idea is having an actual conversation with your site supervisors. Now, I might suggest start out with having an individual conversation, not a group one. So if you have 2 sites or 3 sites, set up a call with each site individually. And I would actually start first with the question that I asked in this webinar about, ask them when they hear the word recruitment, what comes to mind? Because my guess, and I could be wrong, if a site supervisor is not interested or not available to help with recruitment, my guess is when they hear that word, one of the first things that comes to mind is too much work, too much time, or I'm not interested. So one of the ways to combat that is to work with them and explain to them, one, how you can help support them in recruitment, letting them know that they're not on their own, they don't have to do it all on their own, but that you can support them in reviewing applications, recruiting, marketing, messaging. But also give them ideas as to what's in it for them. I don't always like that phrase, what's in it for me, because it sounds selfish, but if you really get a site supervisor to think about, why should I invest my time and energy in recruitment, whether it's 10% of my work or 40%, what's in it for me? Help them to understand, if that site supervisor is going to be directly supervising a Vista member, wouldn't they want some say in who they interview? Wouldn't they want some ideas as to who the person is, learning about them, as opposed to just having a higher level person give them a Vista and they deal with it on site? Work with them to help them understand that. And as I continue, some people suggest asking applicants about what attracts them to their position, because sometimes that can also help the site supervisor think about ways they can craft what they're doing to their work and to the interview. One other thought I have on this before we continue is, if you're struggling with supervisors and sites who are not involved in the interview process, it does help to at least show them that recruitment is not just a one-person thing. It involves everyone, and as I mentioned earlier, it even involves community members, board members, and others. That the more people that are involved, you don't want to have 20,000 people involved or even 10 people necessarily, but the more insight you have and the more eyes you can have on it and getting people to market and recruit the positions, the better, not just for your Vista position and the Vista member who comes in, but helping that site supervisor understand it's better for your overall Vista project, because the more successful and the more enjoyable the Vista member experience is for that Vista member, the better you'll have a chance at recruiting in the future, because that Vista member who loved their year of service will talk about it. They'll spread the word. They'll use social media and everything to talk about it. So that's one way to really help them get it. And then I see another comment that one way is someone who doesn't want to participate, really talking to them about what it means to them and why Vista is important to them. what the Vista project means for them personally, but also for their Vista project. And I see a lot more comments coming in that are related to this and other topics, so definitely take a look at the chat panel, because I think a lot of these suggestions are great, that there's no one-size-fits-all answer. Every project, every community, every recruitment scenario, whether rural or urban, is different. But really think about, and I would encourage you to copy and paste some of the comments in the chat, because some of these are ideas that you can really utilize to help you in your recruitment efforts. So now what we're going to do, we're going to move to the next slide, and in a minute we'll get to the questions. But we're going to do a quick poll for all of you as we think about rural recruitment, and the question is, in what area of recruitment do you feel your Vista project most needs support and assistance? We know that we have ideas in AmeriCorps Vista. We have an AmeriCorps Vista marketing, outreach, and recruitment unit that specializes in trying to put together resources, materials, and supporting Vista projects. But we can't do this alone. And we oftentimes hear projects say, I'm having recruitment challenges, which is good to know, but that is so vague. That doesn't help us think about how can we assist you and what can we do. We know that we can't do everything, but really what emphasis do you need for us to look at and consider, as well as supporting other Vista projects? So that your responses, you can select one, even though we know multiple might apply, but you can choose between we need support with opportunity listings, with VADs, with creating flyers and posters, figuring out how to market on our organization website. We need help with social media and thinking about how do we use Facebook and Twitter. We want ideas on how to do recorded storytelling videos, which are very successful, or how to recruit locally within your own community or region, recruiting nationally, attracting individuals who will relocate to serve, word of mouth, etc. So take a few more seconds to post your comments in the poll. And think about this. Another way of looking at it is, in thinking about your past and current recruitment efforts and all of the information that you know and have learned, where could you best enhance your recruitment efforts to really attract good quality and enthusiastic applicants? I would encourage you to write this question down, the one that's on the screen, and share it with other staff, volunteers, community members, and board members involved with the Vista project. Because this is a question that would be useful for them to know, to see what their thoughts are. It could be that you think you most need assistance in social media, but the rest of your community say, no, we need assistance with word-of-mouth advertising. It would really spark a really good conversation and help you all to try to get on the same page to prioritize where your recruitment efforts need the most assistance and what you can start on first and continue. So hopefully you've been able to post your response in the poll now. We'll give you about 5 more seconds to quickly post something, and then we'll go ahead and close the poll, and we'll take a look at the results to see what most people think the area they most need support and assistance is in terms of recruitment. So let's see what the results are. I don't know whether this is surprising or not, but the majority of people who responded, 26%, say they most need help with local recruiting. How do you find ways to recruit within your own community or region? And there's different things we can talk about related to that. The fewest people said they need help with flyers and posters, but obviously it's across the board. But this does help us in terms of our assistance, but also helps you in thinking about if you have ideas as you're looking at this of ways that you've successfully recruited locally and gotten people in your community or region to join your Vista project, go ahead and post those ideas in the chat now so that as we continue in the webinar, people who need help with local recruiting can get ideas from you who are actually doing recruiting on the ground right now. That was very helpful. We're going to move now to a few quick slides on resources, and then we'll get to your questions and answers. So make sure that as you look at the Vista campus, if you haven't already created a free account, please do so as a Vista supervisor. Get started looking at the Vista campus resources on recruitment in general, but also on rural recruitment if that fits your needs. The supervisor section of the website contains lots of information, and you'll want to navigate to the member section as well for details about benefits that you will want to highlight during recruitment. We'll go ahead and highlight a couple of resources right now. Whether you've explored the Vista campus or not, here are some ideas. First, as you can see, one screenshot on here is considerations for rural or village local Vista recruitment. If you think your Vista project fits this category and you're in a remote area or rural area, check out this resource because it gives ideas that people have come up with over the years how to specifically recruit in a rural or village area. Another option is getting the word out, inclusive recruitment avenues. This one is not specific to rural areas, it's all recruitment, but how can you get the word out? We talk about word of mouth, we talk about social media. What are the best ways to recruit? So there's a PDF that you can download there. And there's also lots of other recruitment ideas. Don't forget that even resources on general recruitment can be used as is or slightly adjusted to fit your community and rural areas. The discussion forum on the Vista campus called the Supervisor Forum is unfortunately not widely used, but we know a lot of supervisors talk about wanting resources and to network with each other, so I would encourage you to use that, especially for sharing ideas on resources and recruitment. One final question we'll ask is, what resources do you know of or have you used to help with rural recruitment? And this ties in with what we just talked about, especially in local areas. Again, go ahead and post any additional comments you have to this question in the chat so that we can support all of you in the work that you're doing. So as you think about this question, what resources do you know of or have you used to help you with rural recruitment? We'll provide you some next steps and move on from there. We know that webinars can be useful information, but we also want to make sure that we provide you specific steps that you know what do you do with this information and how do you move forward. So on the next slide, we'll list 7 specific steps you can take to move forward in your recruitment in rural areas. So here they are. First, reflect on why your Vista project is unique and different. It'll help you think of different ways to market it and enhance your recruitment plan and materials. And I would encourage you, don't just reflect on your own. Again, get volunteers, board members, everyone on the Vista project involved in this reflection. Second, consider, do you want to advertise your Vista project as a domestic adventure? And really try to think of innovative ways to attract people to your beautiful area. Third, housing is a major issue for Vista members. Housing is expensive in many parts of the country, rural, urban, everywhere. So ask yourself, does your project have ways to provide housing? Is there a way that you can offer a housing subsidy to the Vista member's landlord? It can't go directly to the Vista member, but if you can provide any kind of a housing benefit like that, it could really improve your chances of getting someone who might be interested in moving to your area. Fourth, be sure to communicate with your applicants between when you select them and when they start service. There could be a couple weeks gap, it could be a month gap. But the worst thing that could happen is you say to the Vista applicant, we're going to select you and offer you a position, and then they don't hear anything from you until they start service. They feel ghosted, they feel lost. Make sure to stay in touch with them at least on a monthly, if not a bi-weekly basis, so that they know that you value them and that you're excited for them to start service. Next, visit websites for recruitment materials, and we've posted more links in the chat panel, and you can find them also all throughout the chat. Again, we mentioned start a rural recruitment discussion thread on the Supervisor Discussion Forum on the Vista campus. And then I strongly suggest, because I've seen it happen, I've seen it very successful, ask Vista members or alumni to create a service story or video. People frequently find it meaningful to hear and actually see someone telling their passionate story, even if it's only a few minutes in duration. Never underestimate the power of powerful storytelling, which you can post on YouTube, your organization's website, and other places. And again, you can find more suggested next steps at the bottom of the helpful links handout that you can download from link in the chat panel. Very quickly, you'll see that we do have a webinar evaluation. I and we look at your evaluations. That's how we come up with ideas for webinar topics. A lot of people talk about recruitment and suggested ideas for future webinars. So please take a minute to do this webinar evaluation. You'll see the link in the chat panel. You'll also be able to access the link after the webinar is over in the internet browser you used to join this webinar. We greatly appreciate your feedback and thank you for the positive and suggestions you have. With that, we're going to move to question and answer period. I know there was quite a few questions that came in the chat, so I'm going to go I'm going to scroll through them now. But as we do that, I also want to mention there's two ways that you can ask a question. You can obviously post your question in the chat. And again, please be specific about your question so we know the context. Your other option is, as we mentioned earlier, this webinar technology has a raise hand feature. If you'd like to ask a question verbally, please use the raise hand feature, and our webinar gurus, Jeff and Mike, will be able to let me know if there's a caller in queue, and you'll be able to ask a question via phone. So again, two ways, via the chat panel or by phone. And I'll start kind of going through these quickly because there's quite a few questions, but I do want to get to as many as we can. First question I see is about the VMO, the Vista Member Orientation. We talked a little bit about that and how we encourage supervisors to join their Vista members on a Vista Member Orientation webinar. So the question is, how do we as supervisors participate or join in on the VMO webinars? The easiest thing to do, so with the Vista Member Orientation, about 2 weeks before the Vista Member Orientation starts, our Vista training unit staff and headquarters send an email to all the Vista candidates with links to their webinars. And so the easiest thing would be to ask your candidates to forward you those links. At that point, we don't always have direct or the most up-to-date contact information for supervisors since people are just starting. So we aren't able to communicate directly to the supervisors, but you can get that information directly from your Vista applicant and Vista candidate about 2 weeks before they start their service. And yes, those webinars are technically just for Vista, they're required for Vista members, but the reason why we encourage sponsors and supervisors to join them if you'd like is that way you get a first-hand view of what information we're providing them so that when you customize your on-site orientation and training that occurs right when they start service, you can kind of start with where we left off and continue with that information. The next question was, and I apologize if there was confusion, I was talking about the Education Award earlier, and what I was saying was with Vista specifically, the Siegel AmeriCorps Education Award is not transferable. If a member is serving with AmeriCorps State and National, there is possibilities that the state and national member can transfer the Education Award to someone with certain parameters. But with AmeriCorps Vista, any AmeriCorps Vista member receiving the Education Award is not eligible to transfer the Education Award to anyone. We'd like to change that legislation, but that takes a really long time. So just please keep that in mind when you're recruiting, that they cannot transfer the Education Award to anyone as an AmeriCorps Vista member. Another question that came in was, who is their supervisor? Well, that's a great question. I don't know who their supervisor is, but whether you're in a rural area or an urban area, it's up to you and the project director to identify supervisors. Every Vista member should have a direct on-site supervisor. If they don't, you'll want to work with whoever can be appointed that person. It should be someone who is regularly available to answer questions, meet with the Vista at least bi-weekly, if not preferably on a weekly basis to start. Vista members need and want support, and oftentimes one of the biggest complaints I hear in my role is about supervisors not being available, not being able to listen, not being around. And so you want to make sure that you not only identify who the supervisor is, but specifically give that contact information to the Vista member so that they know who that person is and can reach out anytime they have a question. A couple more questions coming in. I'm scrolling through them. There was a question that came in earlier about if we're not getting enough applicants, what should we do, or is there any advice? So first I'll say if any of you have advice on that question, if you're not getting enough applicants, what you should do. I'll quickly say, because I know we're running out of time, there's a lot of things you can do. One, again, take a look at your recruitment materials, make sure it fits your audience. If it's too wordy, some people may not read it. Some people like images. Make sure you advertise in more places that you can. Suggest to Vista alumni create a video, because that is kind of a new and innovative way of recruiting, but again, it's a way that people really can see the face of a Vista alumni or Vista member and really get excited. But also, share ideas with other supervisors on this webinar, because really this webinar is also for networking and sharing resources. One other question that came in really quickly was how many rounds of interviews are appropriate? That really is up to you. Some projects only do one, some do 2 or 3. It seems like more than 3 may not necessarily be advisable based on your workload and availability, but also based on how much information you really want to get. But really what you want to focus on is not necessarily the number of interviews, but what information are you looking for to get from the applicant, and can you legitimately get that in a one-time 30, 60, 90-minute interview, or do you need 2 interviews or maybe 3? It also depends on, are you the only one interviewing, or will they also later after interview with someone else? So factor all those into your workload, your schedule, but also really what information do you really want to need and get from the applicant during the interview process. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the next slide. There are a few more questions that came in that I'll try to respond to in the chat, but I do want to be mindful of time. So on the next slide, I do want to quickly highlight the next webinar that we'll be doing in February 18th on a Tuesday. It's at a special time. It's at 1 o'clock Eastern. It's a webinar called Purposefully Planning the Road to Recruitment. And this webinar is ideally designed for anyone who, after this webinar or in conjunction with this webinar, wants ideas on how do you really set up a recruitment plan. We have ideas of what we want to do, and we've been doing ad hoc things here and there, but how do we really set a plan from start to finish, knowing what we need to do, when to start, how to make it happen? If you're interested in this, or if you know of anyone who's interested in this, the link to register is in the chat panel. It's also on the Vista Supervisors webinar page of the Vista campus. So take a look at this. As you know, we do monthly webinars really focused on information that Vista supervisors say that they need and want to know. Finally, on the last slide, I do really want to thank you for joining us on today's webinar. It's been a pleasure working with you. We do look forward to seeing you again. I want to give a huge shout out again to my editor and support team, Barbara Reynolds. I want to thank our LSI webinar support team, Mike and Jeff, for managing the Zoom technology. And I also, of course, want to thank you, not just for being on this webinar and tackling the very difficult but rewarding efforts of recruitment, but also for whatever role you serve in the Vista project. We here at Vista headquarters love Vista. We hope you do too. And we wish you a wonderful year. Thank you so much for all you do, and have a great day.